So, um, walk with me. Earlier, half an hour ago on Java with Jeff, which, if you don't know, is a daily show about mindsets and mindfulness, growth mindset specifically. This morning, we were talking about. Actually, it goes back to something I posted here on Substack. I don't know. Over a weekend, I think I found this poem that basically says you're going to die, and so it's this call to action or this challenge to live life. Um, and like I said, you can find it on an earlier post or a note here on Substack. But as I was reading that, it starts out, it says you're going to die, and then it goes all the way through and ends with, what do you need to do in order to live life or to have a life well lived? And for some reason, as I was reading that, it reminded me of the Dan Sullivan question, which I've talked about here before. I'm going to talk about it again, maybe a different application. So, good morning. And I feel like it must be really late seeing so many people this morning. It's actually kind of great. But so the Dan Sullivan question, if you don't know it, don't know who Dan Sullivan is. You should Google him. First of all, I think interesting. I think he's often called like this business or marketing guru, which he certainly is. And all my study of Dan Sullivan over the years, I really feel like what's one of the things that's really unique about him is that he comes off as this business or marketing guru, sort of this sales guru, maybe business corporate kind of guy. In everything he does, everything he creates, I think one of the reasons that he's so his work is so effective is that he's really about cutting through to authenticity. And frankly, I think that is unusual in the realm of marketing, business, sales, etc. I think it's one, there's no metric for authenticity, right? And I think that's why you don't see or feel that very much. So again, I think that's something that's very authentic or very different, unique about Dan Sullivan. But that's just a tangent who Dan Sullivan is. The Dan Sullivan question, if you Google that, you're going to find a book, one of his books. But there is an actual Dan Sullivan question, which of course is what the book is based on. The Dan Sullivan question goes something like, if we were having this discussion 3 years from today, on that day, looking back to today, what would have had to have happened both personally and professionally for you to, and then you sort of fill in the blank, for you to feel happy about where you are, or feel fulfilled, whatever it is. And one of the things that I encourage a lot of my clients to do, whether it's on a personal level or a business level, and I work with a number of small business owners, so those lines are especially blurred for them. But if you have customers or clients that you're selling to, you could ask the question, hey, we're going to do this work together. And let's imagine that our work is done, right? It's completed. if you're an architect, you've moved in, or if you do some sort of services, we've completed our work, and now you're morning, and now you're, we've implemented this software, whatever it is. You could ask them the Dan Sullivan question. Hey, imagine that our work is done. You're up and running. You're moved in, whatever the context is. Looking back from that point to today, what would have had to have happened for you to feel like this has been a success on every level? And I think that's a particularly powerful question because it will force them. Most of us, when we ask customers or clients, what do you want? What's success look like? Blah, blah, blah. As most humans today, we're kind of programmed to answer at a pretty superfluous level. But if you ask them that question that way, it really, sorry, there's probably a lot of wind noise. It really forces them to go deeper and really talk about the things that they value. And so that's the reason for asking the Dan Sullivan question in those kinds of contexts. Now, when I'm doing work on growth, the question can be about personal growth, or it can be about relationship growth, or it can be about business growth. And it's the same thing, right? What would have to look like in order for you to say, this has been a great relationship, or this has been, a great growth journey for myself, or something like that. So I think there are a lot of ways. I've never heard Dan Sullivan talk about the question in this way, but I think there are lots of ways that you could ask and utilize the question. So getting back to my original point, if you're new around here, I'm great at tangents, for better or for worse. Still can't go that way. Walking through the park. They've been doing construction here for 2 years. Still doing it. Assume they'll get back more fully once it warms up around here a little bit. Don't tell anybody I'm climbing over these barricades. Anyway, getting back to the original point. This poem that says you're going to die. And what would it take at the end of your life to say this has been a life well lived? Right, that's the question. So when I read that, for some reason, it triggered this thought about the Dan Sullivan question. I never thought about using his question in that context. Imagine that you've reached the end of your life. You're going to get there. It's terminal. Yesterday, as I was walking, as you were walking with me yesterday, I mentioned that I had a doctor's appointment, just the normal, annual thing. But it's with a new doctor. My doctor retired. That becomes a pain. Now you've got to look at your insurance. Who are the providers? Pick out somebody new from all these internet listings, descriptions and ratings, and all this business. And, you've been going to the same doctor for, most of your adult life. All of a sudden, you've got to share literally your most intimate things with a new person. That's not much fun, in my opinion. So anyway, went to the doctor yesterday. Because it's a new doctor, of course, now you're sharing family history because they want to know, right? What's about your mom's side? What about your dad's side? And that, as I was going through that yesterday, I think all this ties together. It's like, whoa, right now I'm really thinking about mortality. As it turns out, none of us get out of this alive. So life is terminal. So, that poem, you're going to die. And then the Dan Sullivan question. Imagine you've gotten to the end of your life and we're having this discussion at the end of your life, and you look back over all of your years, what would have had to have happened over the course of all those years, over the course of everything that you've done, over the course of all of your experiences? What would have had to have happened for you personally? What would have had to have happened for you in relationships? And again, relationships, significant others, friends, family, customers, clients, neighbors, whoever. What would have had to have happened for you professionally? So if you're a business owner, if you're an employee, in your career, however you want to define that. So you've reached the end of your life. You're looking back over all your years. What would have had to have happened for you personally, in your relationships and professionally, for you to say at that point, right, at the point of the end of your life, what would have had to have happened for you to say, this was a life well lived? When I put those things together, that was, wow, what a question. First of all, I think facing our mortality, which is it's a big thing in the Stoics. And if you're new around here, you're going to hear me mention the Stoics a lot. There's a huge intersection, of course, between Stoic philosophy and a lot of faith traditions, I think, especially. Probably Christian faith traditions, but others as well. And one of the taglines, I'll say, from the Stoic traditions is memento mori. Basically, it says you're going to die. Can't avoid death. Your life is going to end, I think, is more direct translation. So this is in that vein. Facing your own mortality, facing the fact that this is terminal for all of us, and asking the question, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about it? Not what am I going to do about it in terms of how am I going to stay healthy or whatever. I mean, maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's part of your version of a life well lived. But since I come here, since I'm on job with Jeff, since I ask you to walk with me and talk about mindfulness and growth, in order for you to get to the end of your life and say, you know what, I'm really happy about the way I lived my life. I'm really happy about I don't think any human would actually naturally say it this way, but I'm really happy about the way I grew throughout my life. It just sounds weird to me. What would that look like? What would I have to do? What would I have had to have done? Or you can say that about a relationship. In order to get to the end of this relationship, whatever that means. Again, it doesn't have to be a significant other. It could be a friend, a family member, whatever. At some point when this ends, it could be till death do us part. It could be whatever. What would need to have happened between us in order for me to look back and say, amazing. That is exactly what I wanted this to be. That is exactly, it was fulfilling, however you want to describe it. And then the same on the business side, career, business. Again, whatever that context looks like for you. And if you think that combination is kind of strange when I talk about growth. Basically, two things. When I talk about growth for you, I talk about three different lenses, the way I describe it a lot: personal growth, relationship growth, and professional growth, because that generally makes us up. That's generally the holistic us as human beings. When I talk about, I also talk about culture of growth, which is really my work. Right now, a lot of that incorporates the idea of innovation, but you have to have a culture of growth before you can have true innovation in your organization. But a culture of growth can be personal as well. Anyway, I define a culture of growth as a focus on the growth of your people, so your employees, if you have them, the growth of your organization, which is why we're talking, basically, and the growth of your clients or your customers, the people that you affect, the people that you work for or with, or you produce for or with. It's almost like, if you remember the term, some people still use it, but I haven't heard it as much lately. If you remember the term triple bottom line, triple bottom line was a way to describe companies that were focused on people, profit, and planet at the same time. It wasn't just about shareholder value, essentially, is what that was. So my definition of culture of growth is, I think, in some ways similar to that. It's a more healthy and holistic view of what growth really means and what's required really to build a sustainable growth mindset in an organization. So anyway, there's a tangent for you there, but oh man, it's cold today. So this idea of getting to the end of your life and saying, it's been a life well lived, all of us, we, in some ways, we can't help but grow. That's what life is. And I was reading, in Java with Jeff, every Friday I read the James Clear 321 Thursday email. James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits. Bringing him up a lot lately. But in his email last week, James Clear talked about habits, good and bad. Habits being like compound interest for our lives, for our growth. We can have, throughout our life, I don't think we help but have good or bad growth. Sometimes we don't even realize it. And I think you can equate some of that to habits. You know, I have not been working on X. In some way, it means I've been growing in the opposite direction. I've not been working on personal growth in terms of weight loss or weight maintenance, maybe, depending on your goals. Well, that may mean I'm growing. Maybe I'm literally growing in the other direction. You know, I've not been working on growth in this way. May mean that I'm moving in the other direction. So throughout our lives, especially when we lose intentionality, I think we have to be intentional to grow. I have to be intentional when I look back from the end of my life. Was I intentional about doing these things? Was I intentional about connecting with this person in these ways? Because in order to grow in that relationship, that's what we needed, was this intentionality. I don't think it's easy for us to lose that. I think it's easy for us to get lazy, to stop doing the work. I think it's easy for us to reach points where, whether we realize it or not, we haven't been growing because we haven't been putting in the work. We haven't had that intentionality. So I think that's really the power of this contemplation today, right? Have you know it's all going to end. And so because of that, if you ask that Dan Sullivan question, looking back, let's flip the script. Looking back, at that point, it's going to be what it is, right? But since we're able today to ask the question, what would it take? What would have had to have happened over the course of all of this time for us to say, you know what? Maybe Frank Sinatra singing in the background at this point. I did it my way. But what would it take? We don't get a choice in when, but we do get a choice in how and what and why between now and then. So, asking that question, what would it take? And then the next question being, okay, great. So now what are you going to do about it? That's some sort of Ford or Chevy electric car, and it sounds like a symphony. That's weird. The sound of electric cars is weird. All right, another tangent. So that's what's on my mind. That's what I'm thinking about. I wonder what you would say. And I guess one last quick thought, because I'm to the coffee shop. One last quick thought just went out of my head for a second. I lost it. What would it take? I got to find it again real quick. Or maybe just wrap it up. What are you going to do about it? That's what I was saying, right? I don't know. I just went blank. This is the opportunity, right? It's the opportunity now to be able to contemplate this and maybe make changes. To get to an intentionality that addresses the things, the answer to that question. So sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I'll come back to it. Maybe I'll bring it up tomorrow. Anyway, thanks for walking with me. I'll be back tomorrow, usually around 9:30 a.m. Eastern, although I may change this. As I say in the description, the About section of my Substack, all of this is going to be an experiment. So I may end up changing up the time. But I invite you to walk with me. I would love it if you would come and we could turn this into a conversation as we walk. This is one of the beautiful things that I have the privilege of doing every day. And I'd love you to join me. And we can talk about these things as we walk. So thanks for watching. And I'll be back tomorrow. Ask yourself that question. What does a life well lived? It's that flip. That's now I remember. The flip, the change is we have goals. We can set goals. We can have aspirations. We can say we want to do things. The change in what we're talking about now and asking the Dan Sullivan question at the end about the end of life is, it's more tangible. It's not, oh, these are the things I want. It's a different perspective. It is, this is what needs to happen in order to. It gets us out of a pretty myopic view, right? We can be really good at looking at things at the level of the to-do list or at the level of our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals, or even, we could say BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, things like that, life goals. But I think asking this question in this way makes it more tangible and hopefully actually makes it more focused on action. So there you go. A couple last thoughts there. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for walking with me, and come join me tomorrow. Feel free to show up, ask questions, give me your thoughts. That's what I want this walk to turn into. So that's why I invite you to walk with me. All right. See you tomorrow.